This is a quick video on focus stacking, which is a technique enabling you to blend several images together with different focus points to ensure you have a picture that is sharp from front to back. You start off doing this by putting your camera on a tripod and composing your composition so that you have something in the foreground that is a detail, and something in the middle ground and something in the background. And you focus on the different areas of the image that you want to keep sharp. So you focus firstly on the thing that's closest to the camera and then move back through the image. So take 3 or 4 or more pictures, gradually focusing the picture on different elements right back to the furthest thing away in the picture. So I, in this instance, have taken 4 shots of this image on the beach, and I have opened them up in the Develop module on Lightroom just so I can see what I have. To start off with, I'm going to highlight the 4 images by clicking on one picture, as I have done here, highlighted, and then clicking on the other end of the series and then clicking Shift and then highlighting them all together. So we need to go from Lightroom into Photoshop so we can use the layers facility in Photoshop. So on Lightroom I just go to Photo and Edit In, and then move right down to the bottom of the drop down box and it says Open as Layers in Photoshop. I'm going to click on that. So this might take just a few seconds as they're quite large images. Okay, so we have Photoshop open now and you can see one image, and you can perhaps notice on the panel on the right hand side, the layers panel is opening the 4 separate images and bringing them in together as separate layers. So if I zoom into this a little bit, pardon me, you can see that on this top image on the layer stack, the stones in the foreground are sharp. If I move down to the next layer, you can see now that it is the middle of the image that is sharp, these little twigs here in the sand. Move down to the next layer and it is the sort of grassy parts, the dune grass that's sharp. And finally the bottom one, it is the furthest parts away, so it's the house in the background that's sharp. So I'm going to turn all these images back onto visibility again and just zoom back out again. So to start with, to stack the images together, you highlight all the pictures in the layers stack in Photoshop. So again, just highlight the top one and then click Shift on the keyboard, highlight the bottom one so they're all aligned, and then go to Edit and Auto Align Layers. And it will say, do you want to do it automatically or these other options, and I'm just going to go for Auto. So while this whirs away, what it's doing is it's trying to make sure that all the elements of the picture are roughly in the same places. So if your camera has perhaps moved slightly, even though you're on a tripod, perhaps the sand shifted and one of your legs might have slipped very little bit, or what's more likely to be the case, especially I think with my image, is that there has been some differences in focusing, which is often known as focus breathing. So when you focus in different places in your picture, sometimes the images or the parts of the image can just vary slightly in size from one image to the next. Okay, so it's aligned the images, and you notice that it has just got a few discrepancies around the edges, so we might need to crop a little bit out at the end. The next part of the process is to go to Edit and Auto Blend Layers. And you're going to get two options. You're going to get Panorama, which is obviously not the topic of today, and you get Stack Images, which is the one we want. So I'm going to click OK with that. And again, this is going to take a little bit of time just while the computer is choosing all the sharp elements from each of your 4 pictures and blending them together, hopefully into one sharp all over merged image. Okay, it's done that now. Now, in the greatest Blue Peter tradition, I have tried this before and done one earlier, and I have noticed that I really haven't quite nailed this. It looks quite good just at this small size. You know, the front looks sharp, the back looks sharp, and it looks okay. But when I zoom in, you can see that down here it's nice and sharp on the rocks, on the stones. But then as I scroll up, this bit of debris on the beach isn't sharp. So the area of sand behind the stones is out of focus. And then as I move up, this twig on the left is sharp, but this twig on the right here isn't, so that's obviously not been caught properly in sharp focus. And there are some areas, I think, well, that's not too bad. I thought there might be some areas around the twig that looked a bit soft. Oh yeah, there's a few dodgy bits around the edges of the twig that's not quite worked exactly. But the background looks pretty good, so the grasses are quite sharp and the houses are quite sharp in the distance. So the lesson here is that I didn't take enough pictures, or I didn't use a small enough aperture. I could have probably got away with 4 images if I'd have used a smaller aperture. I used f8 on this one. But of course, when you focus close in on something, the depth of field doesn't extend very far back. So I should have probably used f11, f16 to get this area of sand behind the stones sharp, even though you know, I did stack the image as well. And obviously the twig on the right here is in a slightly different plane of focus to the one on the left there, so that's not sharp. And yeah, so there are a few areas I could have improved on. I think I could have used f16 on each of the shots, which would have helped, or I think I could have taken more images, perhaps focused here just behind the stones and made sure that I focused on an area that got this right hand part of the twig sharp. I think the background's probably okay. So from here what I would do, supposing this was a decent image, which it isn't, I would go to Layer and Flatten Image so that all the images are blended down to one, and then I could do my the rest of my editing. What I'd probably do is I would go to Filter for this one, and I would go to Camera Raw Filter, and I'd continue doing a few edits. I think I'd probably turn it black and white. It's not very much of an interesting colour shot. And I would probably just bring the highlights down a bit, turn up the shadows a little bit, add a little bit of contrast maybe. I would probably use the black and white mixer and play around with the different colours to see how that affected the tones on the image. And then I can add sharpening, I can do any geometry that I want to do with the vertical or the horizontal planes. And I can vignette it a bit if I want, just to hold my attention in the middle. And then also I would need to crop it's got a few blurred areas, especially down at the bottom here. So I need to crop that out first before I did the final vignette, if I was to want a vignette. But you get the picture. So if I click OK on that and then just bring it into back onto my main desktop on Photoshop, you can see the effect that I'm after. So it is pretty sharp front to back, but there are discrepancies where I should have done more pictures, maybe 2 or 3 more pictures to make sure that the whole thing was sharp, or I perhaps could have used a smaller aperture on each of these 4 images to make sure that absolutely every part of the image is sharp. The rocks in this picture were only a few inches from the camera. It's more difficult when you try and get something very, very close to the camera sharp as well as the rest of the image. Perhaps when you try, you won't attempt to get something quite this close to the camera. Or you might. You might be up for a challenge. Anyway, focus stacking. You can do this, you do this in Photoshop, but you can bring them in from Lightroom in the first place. I should make the point that you don't have to bring them in from Lightroom. If you don't use Lightroom, you can just open up all your 3 or 4 pictures, or however many you use, in Photoshop and select them. If you add them as layers in Photoshop, and then you can select them the same way. So you don't need to use Lightroom. I hope that helps, and any questions, let me know.